Thank you, Professor Shashank Joshi sir, for giving me this opportunity to present this important topic, asthma and biologics. Rather than for next 20 minutes, I shall discuss on ABC, that means asthma, biologics, and clinical pharmacological concepts. So first of all, for next 20 minutes, we will try to understand the targets where the biologics acts and how and what are the weapons developed against those targets, what are the evidences with that weapons, and few clinical pharmacological considerations. So this is a very interesting diagram, and we all know that there is two different pathways that lead to eosinophilic airway inflammation in asthma. Number one, allergic asthma, and number two is non-allergic eosinophilic asthma. So in allergic asthma, dendritic cells presents allergens to the CD4 T cells that induce a T helper type 2 cells formations or increase in number, which produce interleukin 4, interleukin 5, and interleukin 13, and that leads to immunoglobulin E switching in the B cells and ultimately leads to airway eosinophilia and mucus hypersecretion. Whereas, contrary to that, the non-allergic eosinophilic asthma, the air pollutants, microbes, and glycolipids that induce the release of epithelium-derived cytokines, including interleukin 33, interleukin 25, and an important protein, that is thymic stromal lymphopoietin, which activates innate lymphoid cells in an antigen independent manner via their respective receptors like interleukin 17 receptor, TSLP receptor. And what happened, that activated ILC produce high amount of interleukin 5 and interleukin 13, and that also leads to eosinophilia and mucus hypersecretion and airway hyperactivity. Generally, we focus on this part, that when the IgE attach with that Fc epsilon receptor present in the mast cells or basophil, that attachment causes release of histamine and related type 1 reactions. But in asthma, the eosinophilic mediated reactions are very important. So what happened? This type of allergic response often manifested as a dual response that consists, as I had mentioned, that early phase response by mast cell release of histamine, and after that a late phase response also happen, which includes a secondary infiltration of the cells occurs in the airways, and that eosinophils co-migrate with inflammatory cells, frequently undergo degranulation, releasing a range of cytotoxic products, including major basic protein, eosinophilic cationic protein, and different types of eosinophil derived neurotoxins. So this is again an important diagram to understand, because asthma is consists of a heterogeneity of immunology, and among that there are different types of asthma we can see, that can be eosinophilic allergic or eosinophilic non-allergic type, and sometimes non-eosinophilic neutrophilic type 1 or type 17 type, and sometimes polygranulocytic and a subset of mixed granulocytic inflammation. And obviously, just dissect that different phenotypes of asthma, there we can find the eosinophilic type, which has a high type 2 airway inflammation that is present around more than 50% of the adults in asthma. But if we have some corticosteroid withdrawal studies, that also suggests that this number is little bit underestimated. And there are lots of studies which also suggest that there is some atopy which is present almost 60% of the adults in asthma. So as we are talking about the non-Th2 type of asthma, the number may be like that 40% of that. But what happened? Maximum of cases in that subpopulation also, as the patients already took some inhalational corticosteroids, there is a chance of neutrophilic response, and that neutrophilic response can underestimate the prevalence of eosinophilic type asthma or Th2 mediated asthma. And in this, we can see the difference between T2 high asthma and T2 low asthma. T2 high asthma, though the number we are mentioning that 50%, but in actual field, it is more likely to be more in number. They are more steroid responsive. They are eosinophilic. There is an atopic component. Ig is high. They are very much responsive to T2 inhibition and generally present as a severe asthma. Whereas the T2 low asthma, there is an absence of eosinophilia. They are poor steroid responder, more linked with obesity or neutrophilia, and their response to T2 inhibition is less, and they are less severe in general. And there is an increasing gene expression. If we see the genetic map, then we can found there is more expression of interleukin 5, interleukin 13 and interleukin 4 in the airways. And to understand what drugs or what biologics to be introduced, the biomarkers are very important in severe asthma. And for biomarkers detection in severe asthma, there are different biomarkers we can see in this screen. Currently used biomarkers that include blood eosinophil count, serum Ig, serum periostin level, also known as eosinophilic cationic protein charge or ECP, levels of nitric oxide in exhaled breath, that is the FeNO, and in some centers sputum eosinophil count is very important. And sputum eosinophil counts but not FeNO may help in obtaining the better outcome measures. Different studies that suggest that in terms of reduction in exacerbation, if we can use this sputum eosinophil count, that gives some better idea. Blood eosinophil count can predict responsiveness to the corticosteroid therapy, particularly in children, and the use of biomarkers will be increasingly to identify the patients that's suitable for specific biological treatments. So baseline blood eosinophil count is being used as a biomarker to predict the clinical efficacy of different drugs. Specifically, we will talk about anti-interleukin 5 therapy, and apart from that, the total serum Ig level has been used as a response of biomarker for the treatment for using biologics like omalizumab. And high levels of FeNO and blood eosinophil count more than 260 that significantly predicted who are responding with a reduction in the exacerbation by treatment with anti-IL-5 or anti-IL-4. So this is in general what are the important biomarkers we talk about. And as we mentioned, the sputum eosinophils is very difficult to measure, and there are very few centers in specifically in Kolkata where we can measure the sputum eosinophil. So we can have blood eosinophil count, which is a good surrogate marker. And now coming to the different biologics that approved globally for asthma management. Omalizumab, starting from 2003, it was approved, and now it is approved for moderate to severe persistent asthma uncontrolled by inhalational corticosteroids in age more than 6 years. And in case of urticaria, obviously this age cutoff is 12 years. The mepolizumab, it is again used as a maintenance treatment for severe asthma in age more than 12 years. but that asthma should be the eosinophilic phenotype. Reslizumab also add an maintenance therapy. The age cutoff is 18 years here, and obviously eosinophilic phenotype. Benralizumab, again, it is used for eosinophilic phenotype and add on maintenance therapy. Here the age is 12 years. And dupilumab, which also acts as a agent not only with asthma, with atopic dermatitis also. It is age cutoff is more than 12 years and used for eosinophilic phenotype. And here the corticosteroid dependent asthma, we should use dupilumab. Now if we go by again that cartoon, that chart, there we can find the different part where different biologic acts. So here the IG, anti-IG omalizumab, they block the binding with that Fc epsilon receptor in mast cells. Then coming to the mepolizumab, which is an anti-IL-5, which blocks the interleukin 5 binding with the eosinophil. And then the benralizumab that blocks the IL-5 receptor that present in the eosinophil, which is blocked by, which is again killed by antigen dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity by binding with the natural killer T cells. So now coming in details of different biologics, specifically I will focus on mepolizumab and benralizumab because these two drugs are new in India for last 3 years or 4 years. Benralizumab is just approved 2020 December. So how they act? So in anti-IL-5, the mechanism of action is that this anti-IL-5 antibody products achieve eosinophil reduction through the indirect mechanism of IL-5 neutralization. The drugs like mepolizumab and resilizumab, which results in passive eosinophil apoptosis or reduction. And this passive eosinophilic apoptosis that results from interleukin 5 ligand inhibition is likely to be slower than that by the benralizumab mediated antibody dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity. So this is also in short form ADCC, and that may result in less complete clearing of eosinophils from the tissue space. Now coming in details of this benralizumab, which we got the DCGI permission to market in India to 2020, that benralizumab is an anti-interleukin 5 receptor monoclonal antibody and which predominantly expressed on eosinophils and basophils. There is an afucosylation of that Fc portion of that benralizumab antibody which increased its affinity for the Fc receptor on the natural killer cells, and that facilitates the antigen dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity, and they recruits natural killer cells to eosinophil and basophil, ultimately that targets and induce apoptosis via enhanced ADCC. This results without the release of toxic mediators, because there are some toxic mediators that can also come up from the eosinophils, like eosinophilic cationic proteins and different eosinophil derived neurotoxins. So benralizumab induce rapid and near complete depletion of eosinophils in the blood and from different parts of our body like airway tissues, sputum, bone marrow also. This depletion of eosinophil is generally reversible following cessation of benralizumab therapy. The clinical significance of different mechanism of action remain to be tested. Specifically, there is a concept whether we can use both of these drugs together and that can give some better benefits. So now in these are important drugs that is available in India. The benralizumab, mepolizumab and omalizumab, all of them reduce the acute exacerbation rate, annual exacerbation rate by significantly compared to their placebo arm. And oral corticosteroid sparing effect, that is also present among all the monoclonal antibodies. And if we go by the OCS sparing effects of these drugs, then we will find that 52% and 18% that completely stopped oral corticosteroids on benralizumab therapy and mepolizumab therapy. The oral corticosteroid dose reduction by more than 50% seen in benralizumab patients, 73% population, and 54% of the mepolizumab population. And there is a 70% reduction in annual exacerbation rate with benralizumab as compared to the 32% in the mepolizumab in the same therapy. And whether this clinical effectiveness of anti-IL-5 or IL-5R receptor agonist mepolizumab or benralizumab is dependent on the co-eligibility of the omalizumab, it was found that this is independent. So even those patients who are not eligible for omalizumab therapy, they have effectiveness with mepolizumab or benralizumab therapy. And there is the baseline serum IgE concentration, whether they had any effects on the effectiveness of these two drugs. There is also a study done on benralizumab. So all across the IgE level, there is some benefits was found. So baseline, the effect on exacerbation frequency reduction is again independent of the IgE concentration. Now coming to another part, that is the IL-4 and IL-13, and the key components of the Th2 pathway. They are very important. Why? The IL-4 is important for CD4 T lymphocyte differentiation and ultimately production of IgE. Interleukin 13 is important for airway hyperresponsiveness, mucus production, and subepithelial fibrosis. And there is one drug known as dupilumab, which is a monoclonal antibody subunit to that IL-4 receptor that inhibits both IL-4 and IL-13 activity. But there are some also trial to get some monoclonal antibody which can block IL-13 only, that like lebrikizumab and tralokinumab. They are studied in severe asthma, but the reports we are awaiting on those reports. Now another part, that is the prostaglandin D2 receptor. They are generally responsible for the late phase type 1 reaction. So they have a definite role in Th2 pathway, and these receptor stimulations are important for the migration of the Th2 cells that stimulates IL-4, IL-5 and IL-13, and they can delay the apoptosis of the Th2 cells. So there is one drug known as fevipiprant. They are on trial. They are selective and potent antagonist of this particularly prostaglandin D2 receptors. They are also in trial. So another epithelial cell-derived cytokine is important in the pathogenesis of asthma, that is thymic stromal lymphopoietin. They drive the allergic response by acting through the innate immune system and activates the dendritic cells and mast cells. So levels of TSLP protein found in the airway of the asthmatics are higher when compared to the normal. And there is one drug known as tezepelumab, which is a humanized monoclonal antibody that binds with this TSLP and prevents interaction with this particular receptor. And there is a significant persistent decrease in blood eosinophil count, FeNO levels, and total serum IgE in their phase 2 clinical trial. So whether we can also target non-type 2 reactions. So non-type 2 reactions are important for neutrophilic asthma. There are some agents which are on trial phase, like brodalumab, which is an IL-17 receptor antagonist, but failed to show clinical benefits on asthma symptom score in their phase 2 clinical trial. There is another part, CXCR2, which is a potent chemoattractant for neutrophils. Some drugs are trying to get on modulating on that particular receptor. and that is known as navirixine. They reduce the sputum and blood neutrophil counts and trend towards better asthma control based on SCQ, but there is no significant change in the FEV1. The therapies that target IL-6 and IL-13 may be beneficial in non-type 2 targets, non-type 2 mediated asthma. KIT proto-oncogene, that receptor tyrosine kinase, that is also found in the mast cells, and they are essential for the mast cell development and survival. And we all know about imatinib. So whether that imatinib has some effect by reducing the level of KIT and reducing the asthma severity in the non-type 2 mediated asthma. So how to choose a biologic medications? We have to identify the patients with severe asthma who could be a candidate for biologic medication. I just omit that slides that was beautifully mentioned by our previous speaker, where to use which biologics in GINA 2020 guideline. She had mentioned beautifully, and then determine the severe asthma endotype. So the number one important issue is the patient's weight, and as per the weight we can decide the dose of the particular monoclonal antibody. So resilizumab, which is an intravenous monoclonal antibody against IL-5, which is now not available in India, that depends, or that is better for heavier patients, because we know that there is in using omalizumab in obese patients who weight more than 120, it is very difficult sometimes to use omalizumab. Next is the mechanism of action. We have to consider mechanism of action during choosing monoclonal antibodies for asthma. The mechanism of action is slightly different from the benralizumab. Already we discussed why it is different in benralizumab compared to mepolizumab and resilizumab. And benralizumab targets IL-5 receptor, whereas mepolizumab and resilizumab directly blocking the IL-5 itself. So if patient does not derive benefit from mepolizumab or resilizumab, we can think of transition to benralizumab, and that may be reasonable. And we also think about the ease of administration methods. All these drugs are subcutaneous. Mepolizumab a 4 weeks interval generally, benralizumab 8 weeks interval. Resilizumab, there is a problem because it should be given intravenously every 4 weeks. And another drug which is not approved in India, but it is approved in USA. This is also used in case of atopic dermatitis. And if a coexisting atopic dermatitis patient present with asthma, we can think of using dupilumab when it is approved in India. So it may offer substantial advantage for patients with type 2 inflammation characterized by high eosinophil count or high FeNO level. And this is very easy to give also in the home administration because less chance of anaphylaxis. So we have to consider other comorbidities. Just we had mentioned, if there is concomitant atopic dermatitis, we can consider using dupilumab. Anti-IL-5 drugs, if there is concomitant chronic rhinosinusitis with or without nasal polyps, we can think of using anti-IL-5 drugs. With both allergic and eosinophilic disease targeting both Ig and IL-5, that may work well. We can combine omalizumab along with mepolizumab or benralizumab. But the clinical trials are now ongoing. We cannot comment. This can be done. This combination has some synergistic role or not. That will be only decided after having some good clinical trial data. Now for non-Th2 endotype, after detecting there is no FDA-approved biological medications that available, chronic macrolide therapy, bronchial thermoplasty, and sometimes imatinib off-label can be used. Therapies that target IL-6, IL-17, and IL-13. This search is now ongoing. So coming to my summary slide, that is if there is a severe asthma patient, so we can have if it is a type 2 high or type 2 low, we have to detect that. And we all know that interleukin 25 and interleukin 33 has role in both high type 2 asthma and low type 2 asthma. Then coming to the whether it is a eosinophilic predominant, whether it is Ig predominant, then if it is eosinophilic predominant, our option can be blocking the IL-5, and for that mepolizumab, benralizumab is approved in India. Reslizumab is also approved in USA, but reslizumab is an intravenous option. If we try to block both interleukin 13 and interleukin 4, then the dupilumab is an option, and as already mentioned, dupilumab has an effect in atopic dermatitis patients also. If we try to give only blocking of interleukin 13, then the lebrikizumab and tralokinumab has some option, but again they are in phase 2 clinical trial. And when we are talking about omalizumab, it is an if the Ig level is high, then the omalizumab is the option. And there are some other therapeutics which is generally are in research stage still. They are not approved till date, but we should remember these drugs names, whether this drug came into our market in near future, that we have to wait. But one thing I just want to mention, this is very important, because drug level is a medical legal document, and I am just mentioning the drug level of mepolizumab. So in mepolizumab drug level, it is clearly mentioned that for the registered pulmonologist. So whether if a physician is not a registered pulmonologist, whether he can use mepolizumab on level, that is a question, and that creates some confusion.